in about... Oh my god, I forgot where the full screen button is. There it is. Okay, cool. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Hi, everybody. How are we doing today? Welcome to Infinity and Beyond, AA&E's interactive live stream about issues that matter to us, the autistic community. So with open minds and our opinions, we're gonna share some questions and some hopefully answers, maybe some musings even. Before we get started, I'd just like to tell people that AAD is an organization that provides services to autistic folks, their families, and the folks and professionals that support them. You can click the link in the description to learn more. My name is Olive Gallup. I've worked at AA&E for almost 8 years. In fact, not next stream, but the one after that will be my 8-year anniversary. So, woohoo. I have been diagnosed with spectrum hood since I was 6, and I am also a trans woman, so I am an advocate for both autism and the trans community. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about emotional regulation today. And with me, I have Lana and Kat here, and together we're going to talk about all that stuff together. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves? Lana, how are you connected with AA&E? How are in the community and all that
Well,
stuff?
I got diagnosed in my early 30s, and before that, I really didn't know much about the autism community. Even after that, like, to be honest, in the last 2 years, I learned about AANE when I started attending groups and different webinars, and just learning more about this diagnosis and trying to like build a new way of living life so that like I'm not doing more harm to myself by what I now know as like, sometimes internalized ableism, but also just never having walked the path that was like aligned with how I was naturally oriented, because the whole world is sort of like oriented in the opposite way. And so that was my introduction to the autistic community, and then later my introduction to AA. And AA has been just like a huge difference maker in my experience and like coming to better understanding of like what's really helping for you, like what makes me stronger and like what supports me. And I didn't know there were so many resources, but like being in is like a hub of all the resources. So that was really good for me. That's about it. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for singing our praises so much. We appreciate it for sure, and obviously very happy to have you here. Um, Kat, how are you connected to like this lovely group of people here and Spectrum Hood in general? How did you get here?
Well, I recently actually just found out about A&E. I've been with NAMI for a long time and have done walks for them and everything in autism awareness. I've done Autism Speak stuff like back in Washington State. But A&E has been something I recently just found out in the last like month or so. So I'm getting connected more with that. I am super late diagnosed. So last year, actually a year starting December 4th, actually, so almost a year. And all the signs were there when I was little, but it was like there's so many coinciding and overlapping stuff. So everyone just kind of like chalked it off as, oh, it's this, or oh, it's trauma, or oh, it's this. And it's like, yeah, there's a combination of all this stuff, but some of these things, like, it's pretty obvious. And, so it's finally clarity being late diagnosed. And I've had experience like as in the community as a kid, like, I had connections to special needs and other autistic kids. And at the time, I didn't know we all were kind of different. I just was like, oh, it's someone else with quirks and similar to my style. But like, we would do buddy systems and I'd be pairing and after school with certain kids. And I got bullied a lot because of it, and I really didn't know why. I was like, "What? They're kids, like they're just like me, but maybe a little bit different." Like so, I've always had just a connection and everything, and I feel like we all have a voice, and in being 2024, it's like that there's so much now of spectrum and learning about it that a lot of my friends that I knew also are diagnosed, and we didn't find out until later as well. So I feel like there's a whole community coming together now, and I like it because it's like we're all finally now coming together and realizing that, hey, we're just like everyone else but wired a little differently. At least how I view it.
For sure. Everybody is different bar none. So what difference does being on the spectrum make within that sentiment? Um but you said that when growing up that some of the signs that you are now able to observe were pretty obvious back then. If you're comfortable saying so, what are some of those? What would have tipped you off now if you knew what you know now then?
Well, the tippy toe walking, and
Me
late walk,
too. Me too.
and it'll fix itself and then it'll come back, and it'll fix itself and it'll come back. It's like it's like this thing where it's like I try to control it and it just keeps coming back. So I just embrace it and I'm like, hey, when it happens, cool, whatever. And then obviously the emotion thing, like that was my title as a very, very young child was, "You're a whiner, you're too emotional." Yeah. That was coming from the other father figure that was no longer in the picture after a while. So one of the many reasons why. But yeah, that was, a telltale sign because it was like emotions were a huge thing for me. And it was like, I couldn't really, that was my only way of communication, kind of it was hard for me to do words. So yeah, that was the two telltale things that I look back now and I'm like, those were some big things. Eye contact too. That was a huge thing. Like I could not do more than a few seconds, and over the years I've gotten better at it. But it was something that I always got in trouble at school for, and they're like, "You must look people in the eye," and I'm like, "I can't exactly do that."
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And thank you for the wonderful segue into tonight's topic, because when you mentioned the being quote unquote, as your ex father figure would say, the whiner. How did that come about? Because there, coming from somebody who I assume this guy didn't know much about neurodivergence or being on the spectrum or anything like that. So what did that look like to you? What do you feel like you were maybe trying to communicate to this guy, as opposed to because clearly you weren't being a whiner or whining or doing anything like that. So what were you trying to communicate when this would happen?
I mean, mostly my memories are super, super fuzzy, but for me, mostly it was kind of like if something was, I didn't like it, or if it was something that not necessarily of, when kids are like, oh, you can't have candy or you can't have this, and then they start throwing a tantrum. It was a little different when I got either denied something or I wanted something. And it was just they didn't exactly say, oh, this is the reason why you can't. So in my head, it was I couldn't understand why. So I kind of was trying to show it. And then if it was something, with bath time or something, if I didn't like it, I would definitely be vocal about it. And so I think it was those kinds of needs that I felt like it was more I could have, if I knew how to say, hey, why can't I have this or something, but it was just more of I'm going to go straight to like, the emotion thing, because I would throw huge meltdowns basically, and they just chalked it off as tantrums. But it was me trying to say, hey, I don't like this, or hey, I'm trying to tell you something, but I really can't have words for it. So my memory is like super fuzzy of that, but I think it was more of the fact that it was just them trying to understand what I wanted, and vice versa, me understand what they were trying to want from me.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, if somebody denies you something that you were expecting, and then without reason, like that's not fair. That's unjust. Like, yes, I will make my presence known about that. Like, what the heck? Lana, have you experienced this as well? Like, just things changing in a fashion, and then folks like not really explaining why, and then you're kind of left to just like sit there with the discomfort afterwards. Has that happened to you before?
Like super lots of times, especially in childhood. And like the expectation in childhood was that like whatever I was handed or given like should be pleasing. Not just that like I should like be neutral, or like maybe even the possibility of being disappointed, but rather I should be like grateful and appreciative. But I would need explanations for everything. And that was seen as like challenging or like willful or defiant. But like even today, I still really struggle with anything I find confusing. My system does not have a place to put that, and it doesn't want to have things not in place. But as a child, to like recognize very specific structures around like what made sense to you, and then to have the whole world tell you what you shouldn't even need things to make sense. Like you shouldn't even be thinking through things at this point. You're a child. And I'm like, I don't understand. Does that make me brainless? Doesn't my brain do this? Doesn't your brain do that? I don't understand. And that was it for like maybe till like 3 or 4 years ago. Most of my sentences were, I don't understand.
But like valid, because like I feel like I won't name any names here, but I feel like I was told so many times growing up, like, it's just common sense, and I'm like, but I don't.
It seems like common. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
But we take things literally.
Exactly.
Right, like,
we don't really understand metaphors too well.
And like on top of that, it's like you, like, if you're ever speaking in metaphor, or if it's common sense, quote unquote, and like, or this is something that everybody knows, like, I feel like it's such a cop out to not just give us the info. Like, it's almost like you're judging us for this information that we don't have, when you could just
I used to think that there were meetings, and like you could go to them, and that's where all this information was held, and everyone like common sense was a place you went to, and like everyone they collected all the common sense, they all had it. And then now, like, to your point, no one shared it. Like, but if you missed the meeting, then that was on you. But I'm like, where are the meetings, and why can't I go to them? Because I don't know where you get this common sense from. Where do you collect it? How did it become common? How, it was a lot of things, but there weren't very many like, well, here is the same information that I have. It was just, why don't you already have this? Mm-hmm. And I think now I still have that to myself. I often look at myself and think I'm supposed to already have a whole bunch of things that I just don't have. Mm-hmm. And I still think that's a reasonable expectation, because that's what I was met with filling out.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's not. It's not a reasonable expectation.
I'm so sorry. What was that? Say one more time.
That it's not a reasonable expectation.
No, gosh, not at all. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm still learning that.
Right, and like me too. Like I'm 31 right now. Like I am soundly what society considers to be an adult. So like, you know, it's like I don't know. I don't feel like I know everything yet. Like I don't know everything that I supposedly need to know, which is frustrating. Um, but backing up to like when we were kids, I wanted to ask because like this is probably one of the first times where we would have felt what we now know to be like emotional dysregulation, where like something is either obstructed from us or taken from us or like diverted course with kind of no explanation, and then we have to figure out what to do next with little information and a lot of stress. And so one I wanted to ask you guys, does that seem like an accurate is that accurate to y'all's feelings when you were kids as well?
Very accurate.
Sick. And then so my follow-up question would be, how did you guys get through that? Like what regulatory methods did you have to like make for yourself when y'all were kids and nobody would help to guide you?
Fact finding. Just massive, massive amounts of taking in as much information as I possibly could so that I always had as much information as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I didn't even at the time, and even maybe sometimes now, I didn't even like recognize there were emotional responses taking place or that was a factor. I just would think really clearly about where there was whatever I consider to be like an issue, and like how does that issue get removed entirely. Like there was no like, there's not, how does this get managed, or like how does this get like navigated? It was like, how do we get rid of this in its entirety? And like it never existed. And the only way to do that in my head as a kid was to already know everything. Just anticipate. But that sort of set me up for not being able to handle it if it was unanticipated. So anything unanticipated was essentially meltdown territory.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, I thought that I just had like a really bad temper and like I could just be quote unquote set off for no reason. It wasn't until maybe a year ago that I started understanding that those were all meltdowns. And even now, today, like that's all me getting way past my threshold, continuing to push past that limit, and then being expected to respond as though everything is fine.
Right.
Yeah, for me, like it was different tics that like I would feel comfortable with, like constantly like either making noises, facial expressions, like because then I could focus on that rather than try to like be what they call a tantrum person. Because like the person last year when I got diagnosed, he was like, you have a lot of sense, you can get sensory overload a lot, and loud noises, different things, like I'll just get too overwhelmed and then like bam. So I also had like a bunch of stuffed animals, and I would like try basically to talk to them in a way just to like distract. And yeah, so I would have like a little like group of stuffed animals that I would try to tell them my feelings, and because they're stuffed animals, they'll listen to you. So like it was that. And then I didn't really have any sort of other way of regulating other than just focusing on tics and quirks and stuff. So like, if I was getting very agitated, I'd be stimming a lot more. I would do a lot more facial expressions. And then of course, in turn, people would see that and either be like, hey, stop doing that, or things. And then it would escalate, and then I would be more and more, and then it would just, I'd explode. So I was
like
kind
a
of like
self-perpetuating machine. Oh my god.
yeah. So if I don't have something to like divert my either like have my hands doing something, like whatever, like moving, then I'll start like overthinking stuff and getting overwhelmed. And so like over the course of the years, I obviously had turned nail biting into a stimming thing. So that's something, that's something that is a bad stimming for me, but at least it's, not breaking out into a big like meltdown thing or yelling or throwing things. So like I used to get very violent, and like, now I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that was about. Like, so, it helped definitely, like talking to just stuffed animals and getting back into like my own body of like, all right, I feel comfortable talking to these things, like they're not going to talk back to me, and I can just unload, and I felt better.
Totally. And like it makes sense to me. Like honestly, like I do the same thing when I'm wicked sad sometimes today, cuz like I just, captive audience, but they're also fluffy and kind, and that's good. Um but like gosh, what you were saying about like the self, or not, sorry, rephrase that, about the continuously perpetuating cycle of uh like leaving you in the dark, or like, just continuously dysregulating you, like that's like a like a that's like a truly like torturous cycle to be stuck in, because like, there's, it seems like there's very few ways to get out of that. um and like, one, I just want to like sing your praises for like, persevering through that, and then excuse me, um like continuing on to find like ways to like get the info you need, and then like regulate yourself and stuff like that. And I guess the next question I would have, after hearing you guys talk about like how things were when you were growing up, is like, what did regulation start to look like for y'all as you sort of entered like adolescence and adulthood? Because like, I feel like once, like for me at least, once I went to school, like middle school and high school, is when I started to become aware, like sort of, about like social norms and like cliques and stuff. And like, not to say I could or wanted to participate in much of it, but it at least started to become apparent, and I started to be able to like work the system a bit better. But I guess I'll talk about that later. So like, as you guys started to grow up, like what did emotional regulation start to look like for you, beyond childhood?
None.
Video games.
No such thing.
Wait, so both great answers, but Lana, you said none? Yes?
No.
Sick.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
even into adolescence, I was like, oh my god, there was nothing. I was just all the things, all at once, all the time, and whatever like shows up on the outside. So like, just for someone interacting with me, it might seem like I'm like going from like one extreme to another, but for me, I have all of them, and some are at the top, sort of sometimes, and like the rest are not gone. It's just all of them all at once. And I really I had a almost non-existent interaction with my own emotions or the emotions of other people. And like the idea that like there were social things happening, I didn't get any of that. I didn't know that they were there. I couldn't observe them or pick up on them or try to figure them out. I know that I know, like when I look back, I know that like I started getting way more anxious as adolescents, at the onset of adolescence, but I didn't know what anxiety was at all. Like I had panic attacks. I didn't know that I was having panic attacks. I just
Nobody
sort of
tells
was like,
you
no,
that like
I'm
that's
really
like a thing
tired.
that you can have.
But yeah, I didn't get that at all. And so there was literally nothing. Like I would just blow up at things a lot, slash sometimes, or I would just, like crash a lot, like just be worn out to bones. or I would just be like intensely fixated, or like I was just all the things all the time, and no idea that like that was atypical. No idea. Even like being like I guess what I would now recognize as depression. All of it. I was just all the things. There was no regulation to be had at all. Just a lack of connection and understanding with emotions until they became very, very extreme. And then when they became extreme and pronounced, then they were just there. And that was a thing. And then they were gone. Like, there was nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I feel that. Oh my god, do I feel that? Like,
I call it too much peopling. Like, so when I like, and it's funny because, you know, as you know, Olive, like my husband and I, we go out to a lot of shows. And it's funny because either I'll want to leave either early, or I will be like, hey, can we skip some of these opening bands? Because I want to see the headliners, and I can't tolerate too much this so long. So like, you know, I, in my terms, I call it too much peopling. And, you know, when things like that happen and I get overwhelmed by that, or social gatherings or events, I literally need like 1 to 2 days of just like in bed or just doing nothing, like talking to no one, doing nothing, and just literally basically collecting myself and my thoughts, emotions, and just, yeah, literally doing absolutely nothing. And like same thing with like text messages and stuff. Like if I, you know, there's expectations of like, you know, people, if I don't respond or something, they're like, oh, does she hate me? I think of that too. Like if they don't respond to me, but then I'm thinking, well, okay, I don't respond a whole lot either. But for me, it's like, you know, not responding doesn't mean I hate that person. It just means I can't do this right now mentally. Like I'm too overwhelmed with other things, so I'm just going to put this aside. And so, you know, when I get now too overwhelmed, it was also video games for me. And like, you know, when Tamagotchis came out, when like and anything and little things, I was constantly having to do that, and I got in trouble for it at school a lot, because it's like when I got too overwhelmed or I got too frustrated, I would try to do that so I wouldn't either have a meltdown or like outburst or something. And then it became like not quite a addiction, but it was almost where it like took over my life, because whenever I got overwhelmed, I would just immerse in that, and that's it. So in like learning how to kind of regulate, I now have different tools and techniques that I can do with that. So I'm not like completely just shutting people out, the world, everything. So now I feel like I'm starting to get like a balance a little bit. It's not there, but it's getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that a lot for sure. And it is like, I commend you for like knowing your limits and being able to communicate it. Cause like, gosh, like for the longest time, I would just power through so much stuff. And like, I can tell when I've hit my limit now, and I do let myself like either go home or log off or whatever. But like, gosh, I used to just push through, and then I would be just downright miserable for days afterwards because it was just too much of an emotional cost. But I found that so the way that you both described each situation, I found it interesting because Kat, you were talking about how like you need to like shut off and not speak to folks and like really like have your relaxation time. But Lana, you were mentioning how like, you know, things would just start to manifest, you know, whether that be depression or meltdowns or things like that. And I thought that was interesting, that is like your guys' perspective on it is like it was like, I don't know, it felt very like Kat, you were talking about like lowering like everything to make sure that you can recover. But then Lana, you talked about how things would rise like because of like all the stimuli and, you know, lack of regulation and clarity, which like, yeah, for sure, like both very helpful things to know about like just what can happen when things like this go down.
Only in very recent weeks have I started to explore recovery as like an option of
Right.
things available
Let's go.
as a response. I just I never got it. I never got it. I didn't have it. Um, I I think even now I have a difficult time sort of grasping. That's why I clapped so much when Olive was saying, you know, like it's really commendable to know your limits. I don't know mine because I have these sort of like externally built frames, and I'm like, that's the thing. I'm focused on that, and I don't actually pay attention to like my own responses. And I like maybe like there'll be cues for weeks, and I would have missed all of them. But you
Mm.
know, these days it's like a few days have gone by, and I start to notice, okay, I am nearing something I've seen before. What is that?
Totally.
And then as I start to pick up on it, then I can start to do different things. But that's so new. Like again, in the past, just the very recent weeks, it's very new for me to just be like, okay, so what if you went in the opposite direction of this thing that's clearly causing you distress, but you think it's supposed to be perfectly fine. So there's no reason for it to be causing you distress, so therefore it's not causing you distress.
Hmm.
No, you're distressed.
Yes. Right.
that's a,
I feel like
that's new.
we're almost like gaslit when we're like, especially when we're kids, to be like, no, 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 you have more energy, or like it would be polite for you to stay, and like it makes us like push beyond our limits, and like then when it comes to thinking about like what's actually good for us, we need to think about like now we need to be like, oh, like am I like masking super hard? Am I staying here when I actually really would rather not be? Like we have to unlearn a lot of nonsense from folks not treating our spectrum hood right when we were younger.
Or me now being the one that doesn't do it too, right? So like this whole I built a whole perspective around being a person that wasn't based on what makes me a person. It was based on this sort of external like set of expectations, and I continue to like hold myself to those expectations, even when there might not be anyone else doing it. Just me by myself. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a thing. That's so when you talk about unlearning, that's like where I start nowadays, like
Mm-hmm.
questioning my own like standard for myself. Like, is this really something that considered your health at all? Or is it more something that considered a standard for people that don't look like you at all? And I really didn't get that like when I was younger. I really thought like we're all humans. And so whatever the expectations are, it's based on being human. Whereas it was more, now I'm learning. No, there are like common norms, and they were based on norms. And I never got that. I didn't know where people got these norms from. You know, like where did they like do their sample set? You know, like in my mind, you know, you have to like
Where did you collect your
lay it.
data?
And I'm like, so how do we know what the norms are? But that's, you know, that's they I don't know. There are more typical presentations amongst humans, and then there's outliers. And learning that like I fall as an outlier now, I can be more conscientious, but never having that growing up, I just built a whole set of expectations around what everyone else thought was perfectly fine. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not like so. Sometimes it's like small things, right? Like leaf blowers, right? Like many people I know impervious to leaf blowers as soon as fall starts. I think that the ground is opening up and someone is actively trying to push me inside it. And like just the idea that like maybe you should put in earplugs because that will make it like less strenuous. As opposed to no, you're supposed to be able to withstand all leaf blowers because leaf blowers are not a threat to you.
Mm-hmm.
These are different things, like
Right. Yes,
different approaches.
absolutely.
Yeah,
My partner and I talk about leaf blowers all the freaking time. We're like, what is the like? There's
they're monsters.
the noise is awful, and you could just leave the leaves there. They're not hurting anybody. Like, anyway, that's a whole essay I could talk about on like why like the clean lawn is like unnecessary in this day and age. But we'll
That's to
we'll
say, the
table
rain,
that.
the rain fixes everything. I promise you. Just let nature stay the way it is, and then the rain comes, and it literally puts everything back the way it was.
Yes, 100%. I want healthy soil for the squirrels. But
Oh,
yeah. But yeah, Kat, I wanted to ask, does any of that resonate with you as well? Like when I'm so sorry, I'm having a brain fart. Um, but like just like learning like the different ways that we can like either like give ourselves like an accommodation, like, you know, either by like, you know, say use the same example of like leaf blowers and wearing like earplugs or headphones or whatever, um, or like unlearning like certain like societal practices that are just like deeply uncomfortable for us.
Yeah, like I mean, it was kind of the same growing up of like, you know, the norms. So it was like, oh, you don't know how to do this? Well, you're supposed to know how. Well, I don't. Like, can you explain this to me? Like, oh, well, here the, and I'm like, can you repeat that again? Like, and then also the fact that like, oh, you're supposed to know this, or you should, you know, do things this way. And I'm like, well, I can't do it this way, but you know, like so that yeah, the norm thing is definitely I had like a hard time with. So I was always like an outcast and stuff, but I was always like trying to not conform, but like follow like what quote unquote neurotypical people did. So I would not be able to like not look like, oh, she's the weirdo. But like basically when I got into high school, that's when I was like, screw it, I'm embracing it, because like there was other people that were kind of like me, and then I, you know, was like, oh, cool, well, I'll just embrace it. But I mean, it is kind of a thing where like for an example, I mean, I've landed in the hospital like 2 or 3 times in the course of the last like handful of years due to meltdowns that look like they're different type things, or like, oh, I was suicidal or something. It was just, I got so overwhelmed. I couldn't do any regulation. I couldn't escape to my world. And I was to the edge, and it just blew up. And well, they were like, yeah, you know, so I have been hospitalized due to meltdowns and things, and because they can get pretty violent. And you know, even as a kid, I was considered a violent kid because, you know, hitting, kicking, screaming, biting, like scratching, anything. And I just couldn't like control it. So when electronic devices came out and we were like had fidget toys and things, I was trying to immerse in that so I wouldn't end up at that level. And you know, so to this yeah to this day, like, you know, obviously cell phones are now the thing for me because they're like right next to me and easy. So like that's kind of how that's kind of how I sort of bring myself down a bit. And it's like some people will be like, hey, are you listening to me? Like, you know, and I'm like, yes, I am. Like, just trust me. Like, I'm listening. I just need to like get a little breather here. But yeah, it's something that, you know, I didn't really experience too much until a teenager, where I was able to get some more insight on it. And then I will say alcohol did mask a lot of things. So the awkwardness kind of went out the window. And it kind of became, I was like, oh, I can act pretty normal. So it kind of became a thing of like, I didn't want to drink, but I did to basically not look like I was the outcast. And then it became a thing. And now I'm like, okay, I'm like, if I want to drink, that's on my personal preference, not because I have to or feel like I need to. So there's like a whole thing that I went through as well with different substances and stuff, just because I was trying to be normal. Now I'm like, screw it. I am who I am, who cares? Like,
That's so like that's another like whole essay that like we could get onto is like spectrum folks and substance use for masking purposes. Um, I God like so just content warning for folks who are listening talking about substances. But gosh, when I was in college, I would go to parties and I would have to smoke a ton of weed and also drink a lot just to like be able to be like present and like not like feel like the mask I was putting on was like actively eroding my soul away. Like, oh, it is real bad. Um, but I'm really glad that you are more you're choosing to do that of your own accord nowadays. That's great. Um,
yeah, it's, that method was not a great method for either fitting in and trying to, regulate emotions, because your inability is not really the best. So that was something that I had to kind of learn and then realize, okay, there's other healthier ways of regulating your emotions. And,
totally.
whether it's constant fidgeting, doing things, whatever, like, it's healthier and it's not hurting anyone. So
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, the reason I speaking of constant fidgeting, the reason why I got my guitar up a second ago is any any participants of my groups that I run at AANE who might be listening, um, you've probably seen me noodling on my guitar like while we've been in group together, and like truly, if my fingers have something to do, like I will have a much easier time paying attention. Like it's just a nice thing to have. Um, but I did want to pivot subjects real quick. One quick just opinion solicitation from the chat. Molly asks, "Do you guys have fidget toys that really help?" She says that I'm a fidget toy lover and I'm always looking for great new fidgets. So, any suggestions that things that work for you guys?
the bubble popper things, I don't have them with me because they're packed right now and it sucks. So I'm playing with my hair ties right now. But I have like little Rubik's Cube looking things that you can kind of like unfold and fold and do like weird kind of cool stuff with. And then I call them bubble popping toys. I really don't know what their actual name is, but there's like, I have a unicorn shape, I have a regular one, I have a star one, like, and they're the silicone based ones, and you like pop the bubbles and stuff. That is a huge thing for me. Or just random bubble wrap, and I'll just start playing with bubble wrap. That's always been a calming thing for me. And then, of course, when the fidget spinners came out, I had done that. And, I still use those a little bit, but like, I feel like I've kind of gone through that so much that there's other things and I need more like a almost like a touch and sensory stuff for me. So like anything like squishy or gooey that I can kind of feel and stuff. There's like these goop stuff that have like scents and textures and things. Those are fun to play with. And just any sort of those kinds of things I really like.
Hell yeah.
I don't have any of them. Um, when I play with the things you've mentioned, I get really happy. But it never occurred to me to like increase my access to such things. But as you say it now, I'm like, interesting. I should have considered this and had not.
I feel that.
But I think
That's
I think
that's
like
why.
my hands play with anything that's like around them, like pulling
Right.
on my clothes and like pulling on my hair and like pulling on my earrings. I almost always have daily earrings, and like they're a good source of things to like. And then like my nails are long, and I like get things onto and around my nails. But I've never thought of. I'm just like, oh, that sounds so good. Like I remember like the like slime things, the like I forgot the name of those things. Anyway, but they feel fantastic in your hands and you squeeze through them and everything like that. And like, I've never thought to like, have some to do that wonderful feeling with before. Now I'm like, I need to get some. I need to get some and make it in my hands.
I feel the same. I crave the slime.
I love that stuff.
So
I think it was called Gact or something back in the day. I think or something like that. I think that's what it was. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yes,
so
exactly
was.
that.
Aw.
Because I remember I would like play with it, but then I'd also like putting it back in the container and making a farting noise because I thought it was fun. So,
Yes.
I love that stuff.
the simple pleasures.
It is a very simple pleasure. And like in my mind, I'm like, that's so easy to get, but I've never thought of it until just now.
So we have a little bit of time left, and I wanted to make sure that we chatted about overstimulation in particular before we left. And we kind of touched on it a little bit with like Kat, you were talking about being at shows, and like Lana, you were talking about the cursed leaf blowers. But if you guys wouldn't mind just giving a few more examples of like what causes overstimulation for you, and then really more of what I'm looking for is what do you guys do to either like remove yourself from a situation or like, provide yourself with something that lets you persevere through it.
Like, so ambient sound in general can be at any different, like varying degrees overstimulating, right? So like, and I've known that for like way before getting diagnosed. Like I was able to understand that like I cannot handle what I call errant sounds. Like everything has to have this is what that sound is doing and this is why it's doing it. And if it is outside of that, I can't handle it. So like I know that like I can't like sit inside at restaurants. I need to sit outside where the sound gets like diffused around a lot more things. I know that like I can't like casually like spend time in subway tunnels because like sound is getting trapped in there and it's bouncing around, right? I know that like at home, like I need to dampen any type of input of sound. So like closing my windows and like closing my doors and like putting soft things on the walls, right? All of that sort of been stuff that occurred naturally for me. But like as I get older now, I look for like things that really, really like aid in that. So like learning that earplugs makes less sounds, like that was like a whole new world when I figured that out like a year ago. So like I know that helps. Sometimes being vocal, telling people like I need things to be quieter. That's a harder, newer skill, but that's starting to like come out now. Whereas before I would just think like can't control what other people do. Like you have to like let other people like sort of just be comfortable, and I would just allow myself to be less and less comfortable. But now I'm a little more willing to advocate for myself, so like that helps too. But sometimes I think when it comes to overstimulation, it's like thresholds more than it is like the actual stimulation itself. So like I try to just keep myself from getting to like overload, which requires paying attention to me, right? So like this and this and this and this and this are affecting you now. Can any of them be removed? Whereas before I would just be like, I don't know, I'm just very not okay now, and nothing has ever been okay. Like there was not this sort of like gradual recognition of like what I'm interacting with. But yeah, I know like very first thing, if I want to be less stimulated, reduce sounds, right? But there's also like the stimulation that like builds because like I haven't been paying attention for a while, right? So like if I'm just internally processing like 7 to 12 days worth of brand new information, right? If I've been staring at screens for a million years but had no realization that that had taken place, right? Noticing at the point when I'm starting to get uncomfortable and then saying, do less. And sometimes I don't even know what to do less of. There's another one. Eating, because I'm never interested in doing that. So sometimes I'm getting overstimulated by my body being like, you don't give us any nutrients. And so now I also am like, oh, okay, maybe I should consider whether or not not whether or not I'm hungry, not whether or not I'm interested in eating, just has it happened? And then maybe if I address that, I will also be less stimulated than I currently am now. I recently started learning to like close the blinds. I really love sunlight, but also it can be overstimulating. So I had to learn to like say, okay, maybe I don't want the sun all the way on me as soon as it rises in the sky, which I used to think I would really like. But actually, maybe sometimes I don't want that. Yeah, so learning to choose different paths, which I didn't used to know you could do. Like I thought, once you're on a path, you have to stay that way forever. Learning to pay attention to like what I'm experiencing, because I would left to my own devices, I just let everything get to overload, and then I'll just be there, and that's we're overloaded now. And then starting with those like immediate places, have I eaten, and can I reduce sounds in any way?
Those are all wonderful methods, and like the part you mentioned about like basically having too much of a good thing, like with like sunlight and like some other stuff, like that really resonated with me. And actually, Kat, I think it resonates with you too, because like you were mentioning how like going to concerts is like, obviously you love going to concerts or else you wouldn't be there all the time, but like sometimes it's like so loud, and like sometimes it smells bad, and sometimes there's too many people, and it's just like it can be a little too much of a good thing. For context, Kat and I actually know each other through the heavy metal community first. So
Cool.
yeah, we both go to metal shows all the time, and her husband's band I'm a big fan of, actually. So but anyway, before we get on that tangent, Kat, please feel free to tell us about your overstimulation and how you deal with it.
For me, so one part of something that does overstimulate me, some people find it very rude or offsetting, but if someone's talking about, and this has nothing to do with this topic, I'm saying like if somebody's talking about like a boring subject, like maybe astrophysicist or something, like a topic that I don't really like or something, or if a conversation drags on too long, I will literally like just shut off, and because I will get way too overstimulated, and either I will tell them to basically shut the F up, basically, or I'm sorry, I need to remove myself or something, or I gotta go to the bathroom. Like otherwise it's like I will literally just tell that person off. So sometimes conversations or things can overstimulate me. This one's going to sound really funny because I love horror movies, but I'm also too overstimulated by them. So like there's a point where it's like watching scary movies, I love it, but then I get so overstimulated that I'm like, I have to do something else or watch something else, because otherwise I'm too like nervous or things, or like it just gets to me too much. And so like as a kid, I was super like just afraid of a lot of things because certain movies or things I watched. And then of course, yeah, like crowds and stuff, big crowds, things, I will sometimes get very just overwhelmed. So if I'm in a situation and I can get out of something, I will do that before I blow up. Otherwise, like, it does not look good. But overstimulation is something that, it hasn't quite happened, because I will say, like Olive said, my husband's in a band, and it's easy to focus on that because he helps me a lot too. So I do have him to thank for that, because he can see the signs. Sometimes I don't recognize the signs, or like all of you were saying earlier on, that sometimes you push yourself, and that's sometimes that shows. I will do that, and he'll see the signs, and he'll ask, "Hey, are you okay?" Or like, do we need to go or something? Because sometimes I won't want to leave because I'm like, oh well, he's having fun, I will try to push through this, and then it just ends up not. So it is definitely something I'm still learning, but I do know certain things that do overstimulate me, and I try not to have it completely like take over.
Having somebody there to like help recognize your own signs is amazing. Um, I'm not gonna reveal too much of the details just because private matters. But just recently, I participated in that kind of dynamic where it's somebody I know was like getting like really overwhelmed really fast, and like I could kind of see it coming, but like they were kind of like not really there yet. But it was regardless of like who's who in the situation, it's like it's so nice to have somebody who's actually just an ally there for you to like almost to like tell you sometimes like, hey, this is happening, like do like you said, Kat, like do we need to go, or like does something need to happen right now? Lana, are you here still? I think your screen is frozen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. I am here. Sorry, my computer.
That's okay. Your voice is loud and clear, and I think that's about what
Okay.
matters right now.
Something that you mentioned, that really resonated with me about the kinds of things I can be overstimulated by, and probably as an adolescent, like we were talking about before, it was more obvious, but I never really, conversations would definitely be one of them. And if you hadn't just said that, I wouldn't have also recognized that, oh, that's what's happening when the people are talking, and I wish that that wasn't happening anymore. I'm being overstimulated. But it's never occurred to me until just now that, like, just being in the exchange with another person can be something that in and of itself is overstimulating. Because again, this is a norm. I'm supposed to be able to talk to other people. And so I know that, like, I spend a lot of time hiding from human interaction, but I never sort of pieced together that part of that comes from being overstimulated by human interaction. I'm also very overstimulated by people's faces. When you were talking about when you were younger and you would sort of get reprimanded for not looking people in the eye, I had the same thing. And I don't do it. I still don't do it. I learned to look at people's hairlines. That's like as close as I'll get. But I can't do faces. There's
No.
too much movement, and I just don't want it to be happening because it feels like it's happening at me, and I can't. I just want it to stop.
For me, it's like if I stare deeply into somebody's eyes during a conversation, one, I'm going to look like a creeper, and two, it's like it's so hard to explain it because it's almost like if I do that, then I'm like, oh my god, what are they thinking of me? Are they judging me? And then all of a sudden it just like I get so overwhelmed of like, okay, what's this person thinking of me? And then it spirals down, and then I'm not even paying attention to the conversation. So it's like, I'll do a few seconds of eye contact just to be like the professional, whatever. But then afterwards, I'll kind of like just bounce around and stuff. So at least they know I'm like in their direction. But yeah, like with conversations and stuff, it's kind of like because our brains process things differently, and like we're trying to process all this information, and if we get a little too overwhelmed with this information and the conversation continues with things that we're really not interested in, or we feel like we're getting overwhelmed, and somebody doesn't mention anything, yeah, we will shut off, and it's something that can perceive as rudeness, but it's really not. It's just we are too much stuff in our head already.
Yeah, I got called rude a lot as a kid, and I was just like, exactly, yes. I just agreed. I genuinely thought that what they said was rude and what I was doing were a match, so I must be rude then. Okay. Which is also apparently rude. To not be offended by being called rude is also rude. No idea.
Right. Am
No.
I supposed to be like, oh my God, oh no? It's like,
Yeah, I'm supposed to be sorry about it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yes, what you said I'm doing and what I'm doing match. So if that's called rude, I am also rude.
right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm rude. And they would be like, that's a bad thing. Is it? None of the things you described sound bad to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, my friends, we have been going for about an hour, and I think it is about time to wrap up here. But I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for being here and providing your perspectives on life and sharing it with everybody today. I feel like we've talked about some really important stuff that has come to light, especially all of us as women being able to talk about this, and how things uniquely are, like look to us, and yeah, just thank you for being here, and I appreciate your transparency, vulnerability, and constructivity. So once again, I just wanted to say I have to pull up my script. Don't mind me. Don't tell anybody outside of show business, but when you're on a TV show or a live stream or anything, sometimes you read off a card. But once again, one more time, AA&E is an organization that provides services to autistic folks, their families, and the folks and professionals that support them. You can click the link in the description below for more information. Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been lovely. And Lana, I don't know when I'll see you again. I hope it's sometime soon. And Kat, I'll probably see you in the next couple weeks at a show or something.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.